Today we've got a great revenge story on a boyfriend who said their girlfriend needed to wear more makeup. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, he cheated, so I stopped paying his Invisalign and threw the rest out. Long story short, he also didn't pack most of his things because he's lazy as freak, so the day before he was going to move out, I threw out his stash of Invisalign that I was paying for out of pocket, hid my canker sore powder, he frequently bit himself and got canker sores and the stuff and the pharmacy didn't work for him, and cut up his prescription soles that helped whatever feet problems he also had. Guy was also unemployed for a few months, which, whatever, economy sucks right now. But if you're going to live off of my income during that time, at least respect me. He texted me a few days after he moved in with his family, asking if he could come pick up his Invisaligns and one of my canker sore powders. I said, "Oh, you mean my Invisalign that I paid for? You're welcome to dig them out of the dumpster, and no, I don't know what powder you mean." He had really freaked up teeth before he met me and it gave him bad TMJ, constant migraines, etc. It gives me a lot of joy knowing that he will be uncomfortable until he saves up some money to restart. And knowing him, he won't save a dang penny. Honestly, I just feel bad for OP because if anybody's ever actually looked into Invisalign, it's not cheap. A quick Google says anywhere from 5 to 8 grand. No number 2108 commented, "I wore braces for years, starting from childhood. Later replaced them with Invisalign, not the exact brand, but basically the same product. As an adult, I was finally happy with my teeth and stopped wearing the thing, only to find my teeth moving into a crooked position again. I went back to a dentist and got Invisalign again, but had to pay more since my teeth had to be moved again before I could get the final mouthpiece that just holds the position. His teeth will move again and get crooked again now until he's able to afford new Invisaligns, which will get more expensive the longer he waits. Yes, you definitely gave him the revenge he deserves. I feel like laughing at your story. Freak cheaters, especially maggots like him that live off of other people's money. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy awesome stories of revenge, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. That said, our next story is Punish the woman who was rude to me in the queue. This incident happened just a couple of hours ago. I went out for a lunch break and decided to go to a fairly large store for water. It was rush hour, so there were queues everywhere. While I was in line, there was a woman in front of me who constantly wanted to find a shorter queue to get through faster. She fidgeted, ran out of line, and immediately returned to her seat, constantly looking back and elbowing me. At one point, I got tired of it and politely told her that I would no longer let her into the place if she left at least once more. In response, I received an angry shout in the spirit of Karen, "Your turn has not come yet, so don't waste my time and shut up." Not the best way to end a dialogue, is it? Looking around, I noticed that some of the goods on the counter next to me were covered with stickers with indicators that beeped on metal detectors in case of goods being carried. Usually, these stickers were peeled off by the cashier, but I had a simple but very funny plan. I picked up one of the goods, then imperceptibly peeled off one of the stickers and threw it on the floor at the feet of this woman. And of course, she stepped on it without noticing it. Her turn came, she bought what she wanted, and of course, the siren went off at the exit. By the time I paid off my purchases and left, at least half of the guards had already gathered around this time saver, with whom she was also shouting and arguing. But these were no longer my problems. I mean, part of me is like, maybe they just had some kind of anxiety going on. I almost can convince myself to feel partially bad for them. But at the same time, the way they snapped at OP, it makes it a lot easier to also ignore that. Friend Kinstein 1397 commented, This is perfect. Good for you, sir. Our next story is, a 3-year-old threw my words back at me. I worked in early years for 10 years in a nursery/preschool setting. The setting was in the middle of a council estate, and it was very common to be called a runt by a 2-year-old, just setting the scene, but I loved it. Every lunch would result in multiple preschoolers upset because they didn't get the yogurt they all fought after. The large multi-pack of yogurts had different animals on it, and they all wanted the one with the hippo on a skateboard. Cue disappointed faces when they were handed a boring yogurt. So, to avoid this Groundhog Day sadness, we turned it into a game. We put all the yogurts in a covered box, and they would reach their hands in and lucky dip it. Still some disappointment, but the fun of it really changed the lunchtime atmosphere. I had one little lad try his luck and ask to dip again or have me swap it out. I replied, "Sorry, honey, you get what you're given and that's the rules. Maybe next time." He huffed but accepted it and ate his yogurt. Fast forward to the afternoon play session, and a group of us were hanging out in the home corner. Little lad rarely played in the home corner, so I was surprised to see him, but excitedly welcomed him into the group. He starts cooking up a feast of plastic foods and imaginary chicken nuggets. We all sat at the table and accepted the glorious dishes he handed us. Cakes, pizza, pasta. We had finished our meal and he walks around with a wooden fruit basket. I look in and ask for the green apple. He hands me the red one, looks me dead in the eyes and says, "Sorry, honey, you know the rules. You get what you're given," and smirked. Oh lordy, I almost choked on my imaginary cupcake. Fair play, kid. I burst out laughing and so did he. His mom died laughing when I told her. Unironically, one of the most wholesome and adorable stories I've read in quite some time. Honestly, I wish there were more stories that popped up kind of like this every once in a while. BanSidHe13 commented, "Out of the mouths of babes come things we never should have said. My then 3-year-old once glared at me and stated, 'That's my opinion and you said I could have one.' Dang, snap, kid." Our next story is titled, and I quote, "Tuna." A few years ago, I worked for a very well-known company. I don't want to name the company for many reasons, which itself wasn't bad. However, my supervisor was a major jerk. Most people would understand the type. He clearly showed favoritism to certain female employees and would constantly cast blame on others for mistakes that were made because of his policies. Like I had mentioned, the job itself wasn't bad. I actually enjoyed going to work some days. For some reason that I can't say because I don't know, this supervisor had it out for me. I was never late, I never called off from work, and I actually did my job unlike many of my coworkers. After being employed there for 3 years, I happened to apply, interview, and get hired at another company. There was no way I was quitting my current job without enacting some type of revenge for putting up with supervisor jerk for 3 years. I wanted to make sure it was subtle, but would definitely leave an impact as well as be careful enough to not get figured out as the culprit. My opportunity came 2 days after I put in my 2 weeks notice. 5 minutes before lunch break, Supervisor Jerk decided he wanted to practice his being a jerk skills on me. I was fixing a broken machine when I saw him coming towards me, walking past no less than 3 employees standing around doing absolutely nothing to yell at me, and I mean scream, because the machine I started working on 15 minutes earlier wasn't up and running yet. That was it for me with dealing with his bullcrap. After he walked away and I got out from the machine I was working on, I grabbed my lunch and headed to Supervisor Jerk's office to tell him how I really felt about him and his Gestapo-style tactics of management. Unfortunately, the jerk already left for lunch, so I jumped on the opportunity to enact my revenge. While in his office, his unair-conditioned office in the middle of summer, I reached in my lunch bag and pulled out a tuna fish sandwich. I also had duct tape in my tool bag that I had with me, so I opened the sandwich bag a little bit and duct taped it to the bottom of his desk. I wasn't able to see the end result a few weeks later as I'd already started my new job, but I cannot imagine it was pretty. His office was at least 85 degrees the day I was in it, and that was before a heat wave hit our area. I couldn't ask any of my former coworkers either because that would certainly break my cover. Honestly, if his office is 85 degrees on the regular, he probably isn't even in that office on the regular anyways, so that might have gone a while before it got noticed. Definitely the stench would be the indicator. I'm just saying hopefully his desk was one of those ones that's raised up high enough that if he didn't go to sit at his desk and scoot his chair in, he'd get tuna fish sandwich smeared all over his pant legs. Acquaintance1 commented, "A coworker of mine exacted a revenge just like this one, except he put the opened up bag with the tuna sandwich under her fake potted plant. It was in a pot and in a basket. He put it under the pot. It was a long time before it was found." Our next story is Rude Customer Finds Out. So this was a couple of years ago now, but I was scrolling the subreddit and remembered it, so I thought I would post it here. I used to work at a grocery store and I was in the online order department. Basically, we filled online orders and then loaded them into customers' cars when they came to pick them up. On this particular day, things were slow. A customer showed up with a rather large order and a complicated payment method. Me and one of my coworkers decided to take it out together to shorten the process. He took out the tablet to process her payment, and I was in charge of loading her order into the car. Now, this woman had a small car, and she wanted the order loaded into the back seat, which had a car seat in there as well, making the order even harder to load in. I did my best to load things so that they wouldn't fall, but it was a struggle. However, I managed to load it and get the door closed. Keep in mind, the 12 packs of drinks she had ordered were placed on the seat because they were at the bottom of the totes containing her order. I had packed the order in like sardines, and the woman was far too impatient for me to have taken the time to reload the order and put the 12 packs on the car floor. The rest of the groceries had been piled from the car floor up with the soft things on top. So I assumed that they would be safe, as the seat had a backward lean and it was unlikely the drinks would move forward to hit them. To no one's surprise, she called our department to complain, and unfortunately for her, I was the one who picked up. This is roughly how the conversation went. She said, "Hi, I picked up my order about an hour ago. 2 people came out to deliver it, and the boy was fine, but that girl was terrible. She put my drinks on top of the bread and chips, and they're ruined." I reply, "Oh, I'm sorry about that." She then proceeds to interrupt me and go on and on about how awful that girl was and how she should be fired for being so bad at the job. After about 5 minutes of this, I see my manager Lindsay come into the back room and see me on the phone, clearly annoyed. Stopping, she pointed to the phone and mouthed, "What's wrong?" It was at this point that I had an idea. I cut the woman off and go, "Ma'am, would you like to speak to a manager?" She enthusiastically agrees, and I smiled to myself. I just barely pull the phone away from my face and put it slightly down toward my chest, making sure that she can definitely still hear me. Looking my manager in the face, I very loudly say, "Lindsay, some lady called to complain about me and wants to talk to you." Silence from the phone. Lindsay comes over and takes the phone, and I stand there as they have a very short conversation before Lindsay hangs up. She turned to me laughing and said that she was suddenly extremely polite about what was wrong. Lindsay asked me to be a little more careful loading groceries in the future and left the back room smiling and shaking her head. Sometimes I miss that job. It had its funny moments. I don't think it's too often you hear a story from somebody who worked in retail and they ended with, "Sometimes I miss that job." I don't know, I guess it really all depends on if you have good management or not. Bad manager and you want to be out of there yesterday. AztecSky64 commented, "I hate whiny or rude customers. We have several at my store. One in particular, she wears the exact same pair of sweatpants every time I've seen her. I've been there almost 5 years now. Every time an item is removed or deleted from our system, she complains. It's always our fault and never hers. I just laugh when I see her. She's never even smiled or said thank you for anything we do for her." Our next story is Revenge Against a Bully. This happened when I was 10 years old. My genetics freaking suck. People on both of my parents' sides of the family get severe acne from a young age. Other kids would stare, but no one was ever rude until this kid. I honestly don't even remember the kid's name, this was so long ago. We'll call him Richard because that's what he was. He would call me names multiple times a day, every day for multiple weeks. Some of them were honestly pretty creative. It didn't really bother me until he started getting his whole group of friends to do this in unison with him, and they would wait between classes, so a lot more kids were passing by, but with the group of them, it was loud enough for the whole hallway to hear. A singular Richard was tolerable, but a handful of them was too much to deal with. Yeah, I know what I said. I think what really pushed me over the edge was when they started making fun of me during class, pointing and laughing while doing it so that they could make it blatantly clear they were talking about me even if they were whispering. At least when it was between classes, there was some reprieve, but throughout the whole day? Nah. So I pulled what I thought was a seemingly innocuous prank. On this day, Richard was especially disruptive. He and his friends were loud enough that the teacher paused class to get them to settle down multiple times. I noticed that he was also barely sitting on his chair. He was sitting just on the edge of it all day so that he could lean forward for a few seconds off his seat, cup his hands around his mouth to shout to his friends across the room, and sit back down after shouting whatever he was shouting. As fate would have it, that day assigned seats had changed, and I was now assigned to sit right next to him. Tired of dealing with his crap after so long, when he leaned forward again after maybe the 10th time, I pulled his seat an inch or two back. When he attempted to sit back down, his butt hit the floor instead of his seat. Maybe his ego was hurt when the entire class laughed at him because he told the teacher what I did to get me in trouble. Side note, our teacher knew he was calling me names because that's how loud him and his friends were starting to get, but the teacher would only ever give a half-hearted, "Knock it off, Richard," before getting back to classwork. He dramatically even asked to go to the nurse because the edge of the seat scraped his back when he fell. He wasn't bleeding or anything, but it was a little red. However, he said it hurt so much that he wanted this escalated. So the teacher had to involve the principal. This kid was your typical troubled youth. You couldn't count on both hands how many times he'd been sent to the principal's office throughout the year. Never from bullying me though, because my teacher said I had no grounds to escalate my issues with the principal since he was never physically hurting me. Meanwhile, I'd always been your typical model student. I had never been summoned to the principal's office, I was always quiet during class, and I got straight A's on my report card all the time. It was clear to anyone, even without reading our school records, that Richard had just pushed me too hard. Somehow, 10-year-old me was highly aware of this. We were both taken to the principal's office. She had us both to sit down, saying she had to deal with something real quick, but she'd be right back. As soon as she left and that door closed, my very first thought was, I need to cry. If I cry, I'll get in less trouble for this. By the time the principal made it back, I had turned up the waterworks. She said she wanted to hear both of our sides of the story, so she told Richard to wait outside her door so she could speak with me one-on-one. I was honest about everything that had happened. I told her that him and his friends would even pass notes during class to make fun of me with whatever they wrote down. My teacher even found one of the notes in his desk after I told this to the principal. But I made myself tell the story between choked sobs as though recounting each incident was just too traumatizing for me to even talk about. Hey, if Richard was going to be dramatic over his pain, I could be dramatic with my emotions. My dad also knew I'd been having trouble with him, so when the principal called him, he stood up for me. In the end, Richard received a 2-week suspension. I only received 3 days of in-school suspension, and since I finished schoolwork early each day, the principal actually asked me to tutor some other kids, giving me something to do to pass the time. I was warned, however, to never do what I did again, or else next time I might kill someone. Right. I honestly felt bad for Richard. In the aftermath, I found out that each time he got in trouble at school, his dad would hurt him at home. Granted, if he got in trouble, it was from his own poor, idiotic choices, but I still don't condone the violence. He even had bruises when he came back. He never made fun of me again, though, and since he was the instigator in his group of friends, they all stopped making fun of me too. Maybe 6 months later, on the last day of school, kids were asking their friends to sign their yearbook. He came up to me with his, very sheepishly, and asked, "Would you please sign this?" There was a lot of guilt in his voice. When I did, he smiled brightly, not like all of the malicious smiles he used to give me. I forgave him and he knew it, and it made him happy. But would I play it off the same way if given the option to redo things? Probably. That last sentence actually is kind of heavy because, on one hand, it really did solve all of OP's problems, but at the same time, if you know what's going to come as a result for Richard out of this happening, and you still say, yeah, I'd double down, I'd do it again, it's almost like an unnecessary sentence for OP to write. It's almost like, yeah, I would doom Richard to deal with his dad again if I had to. Automatic Whereas 860 commented, "Your teacher was a lazy crud who could have and should have done more to resolve this situation sooner. Good for your principal. When I grew up long ago, no one did much about bullying, including the parents. But the teachers simply looked the other way every day. If I complained, it was patiently explained to me that it was my fault or I was overreacting. No one, of course, schooled me on how to handle it better. Seems to me that you understood what was required." Our next story is, sure, I'll speak in my mother tongue. Yesterday, I, 17-year-old female, was in the changing room with my classmates after PE when they started ganging up on me about speaking English. We live in Slovenia and I am Slovene, but I only came back to my country after living abroad for 4 years in 2023. Abroad, I attended a European school and spoke English basically always. All my classes were in English and a couple were in French. All that is to say, I speak fluent English, I think in English, I even dream in English. Sometimes I even have to translate a sentence in my head or words with Google Translate because I think first in English. I speak Slovenian in school, but their problem was apparently that often when saying something out loud to myself or to the general public, I say it in English because that's just how my brain is wired. I honestly don't even realize what language I've used until a couple seconds after I finish talking. Their argument was that I've been in Slovenia for a year and should switch back to Slovenian. It's not a problem of me not wanting to switch, it's that at this time, this is impossible. They said that boys in our class are laughing at me when I speak English. True, but they've laughed at a chair before, so I'm not that worried. They didn't let me argue back or explain myself. One girl was even yelling at me about it, which, calm down, it ain't that deep. As someone told me, her parents fought a lot before divorcing, so that apparently now excuses her actions. But then, they messed up and asked me what my mother tongue is. They obviously expected me to say Slovenian so they could argue I should speak it. While yes, it is Slovenian, it's also French. I've lived abroad before when I was very little, and growing up, I learned both languages at the same time. I even spoke mainly French up until I went to first grade. I still speak French with my mom, although both my parents are Slovenian, it's so I don't lose the language. Say it's a loophole or, well, actually, but I took the chance. I'm currently speaking to all of them in French. Funny enough, I don't even speak to them, but anything I say to myself or in their general direction, it's French. It's actually very fun and a nice way to not forget the language, as I only have my mom to speak it with. I think I'll continue this until someone apologizes. Currently, I only speak non-French with two of my classmates, my best friend who was on my side, and a girl who has, I guess, apologized, and both don't mind me talking in English. You know, it's kind of funny to see the opposite side because you know very well if this was taking place in America and somebody from Slovenia moved and they speak mostly Slovenian, you're gonna have some real ignorant people making fun of them and saying, hey, what's your native language? Say some stuff. I guess it really is a small world. Golbez89 commented, don't let them pressure you. Being multilingual is not just an accomplishment, it's also a gift that will serve you well the rest of your life. Don't lose any of your languages. I wish I was fluent in the three I loosely speak. Neothanks commented, I only speak or write in English and can sort of identify what some languages are by how they sound or how the characters look. That's it. But when I see other people acting like someone who doesn't speak English well is stupid or like they're less of a person, it blows my mind. Like someone who speaks zero English is still fluent in at least one language, and someone who speaks English poorly still knows more languages than I do. This next story is, cake is for people that don't insult their kids. I try so hard to be the bigger person, but this was so satisfying. I got a free slice of carrot cake for my work tonight because we had extras. My mom had insulted how I did my hair for work. I'm a hostess at a fine dining restaurant but spend most of my time flipping tables, so I'm kinda everywhere in the place, and told me that I should be ashamed of it and myself since I have really nice hair. If I may sound conceited for a minute, because I'm running around a lot, I like to have my hair completely out of my face, and my mom is personally offended by this for some reason, so I came home with the cake and told her she couldn't have any because she had insulted me. Part of me wants to feel bad, but I know I'm right for not feeling bad. It definitely depends how much they're like pressuring you on this and how nasty they're actually being about it, but I would almost try to like reframe this in my mind as like almost a compliment. Like, oh, they just think it looks so pretty a certain way they can't help but speak up about it or something. I don't know, maybe that's just the wrong way to go about it. Paladin3 commented, tell your mom to think about all the times she's insulted you when she's old and dying alone, and if you give her grandchildren and she asks why you never bring them around, tell her you don't want them exposed to her abusive, belittling behavior. OP responded saying, oh, there's no way in heck I'm giving her grandkids, but that can of worms, much less dramatic. My sister and I are both staunchly child-free, but I'm still decently young and also single as freak, so it wouldn't really matter either way for me. And my parents still want grandkids, but I think they're finally realizing that all the years of trying to wear us down hasn't worked. And my sister just got married a year ago, so if we'd had kids before then, that would have been a whole other thing since my parents are really conservative Baptists. Wow, I woke up 5 minutes ago and I'm already pouring my guts out to strangers on the internet. Sorry you had to hear all that. This next story is, grandson calls from jail. About twice a year for the past 7 years, I get a phone call from my grandson in jail. I don't have kids, so I've started extending the conversation to waste the scammer's time and save the next person some grief. With one call, I asked him why he was breaking my heart because he promised me when I was sick in the hospital he was going to come back to Jesus and stop hanging out with those bad people. Jesus wanted him to not go to jail. Jesus could help him. He promised he'd go to church and be good for Jesus if I sent him $4,000. I told him I would give Jesus the money and Jesus would get it to him then. With another call, I asked him why he ruined Christmas dinner by bringing that gold-digging tart that left his brother right before the wedding. He was never welcome in my home again. I never wanted to see either of them. He admitted he made a mistake, she was all wrong for him, and it was her fault he was in jail. Another call, I asked him if he told the police about what happened at the cabin. I explained that sometimes bad things happen, but it was in the past. We have to move on. And we didn't even know what his uncle did, and he couldn't help himself if something did happen. The last call, he asked for money, and I reminded him he had stolen my car and my jewelry. I didn't have anything left other than my Beanie Baby collection that was going to be worth a fortune next year. I just needed to figure out how to get them on the eBay. You know, even though OP wrote it in the first paragraph, I was like somehow believing this is actually an actual grandson calling from jail, not OP RPing with some scammer trying to get them to admit to some heinous crime so they can try to milk grandma for $4,000. Glinda commented, "I've already buried those 2 poor girls you killed last year. I can't keep doing this. You're going to have to stop. You should have plenty of money left from that bank job you pulled last year. Oh, see if you can find out where Bruno is. He was my favorite when I visited your dad in that very same jail. A few minutes alone with them and your dad was treated like a king. Maybe you can do that too." Our next story is, want me to wear more makeup? Big mistake. Huge. I hope this counts. Last year, I was casually seeing a guy for about 2 or 3 months. Now, without sounding conceited, I'm a pretty conventionally attractive woman. I tend not to wear any or much makeup or dress up, as I genuinely dislike the attention and am lazy. Things had been going okay. I was super into him, but slowly started to realize he was never looking for anything more than casual. This came to a head one evening where he mentioned the fact that I should really be putting more effort in. Naively, I thought he meant into the relationship. Nope, he meant I should get dolled up more often. Also want to note that a lot was going on in my life. Family in hospital, lost my job, needed to move. Makeup was the last of my worries. I also always looked put together. He'd meet with toothpaste on his top. We worked together before, and I never wore makeup then, so I thought he liked me for me. After discussing this with my friends, I realized this was the final straw. He was selfish in bed, I'd basically been acting as his therapist and mother, and I didn't want a future with him anyway. My flatmate is a hair and makeup artist. She blew out my naturally curly hair. She made me up so beautifully. I accessorized my long silk dress to make it a bit more casual, wore heels for the first time in years, like 3 inches, but still. Again, not wanting to brag, I was stopped in the street while on my way to meet him for drinks. I felt gorgeous. He thought so too and was so full of compliments. I don't know if I was looking too hard into it, but he seemed kinda smug too. Nah, mate, this actually isn't working out. I think we want different things. Also, you should probably seek professional help. Enjoy your drink. I felt like Julia Roberts walking out of that bar. I didn't turn to look, but I like to picture him staring at me speechless. Freak you, man-child. I just hope OP promptly went home and blocked them. You know what? No, I hope OP pulled out their phone in front of them, said what they had to say, and proceeded to block them right there in front of them before walking out Julia Roberts style. Affectionate87 commented, "Just came here to say women are amazing with that whole makeup thing. If you're beautiful as you say, makeup is like God mode." I remember being sat next to a woman on a flight. She had no makeup on and she was nice looking. Didn't pay much attention. 30 minutes before we land, she goes to the bathroom and what returned was this goddess with everyone staring. The change was startling. I thought I was a different person. She saw my expression and said, "Yeah, I clean up well." She explained she was a model and going straight to a shoot that was time sensitive and wanted to do most of the makeup work to save time for the artists. She said she normally just has them do it. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely awesome revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.